Welcome to the Know Why podcast. You have heard about the loneliness crisis, and you've probably seen headlines that are worrying specifically about young men. Today, they're often considered more lonely than women, experiencing what some are calling failure to launch, drawn to political extremes, desiring marriage and a family, but not often having success in that regard. In the midst of all of this, we also have a growing number of Americans engaging in some form of personal relationship with a chatbot. And so today we're going to talk about how this is impacting young men specifically and what Christians can do differently to help young men. And so I'm very glad to be talking about this today with Matt Trayler. He is the Director of Programs for Christian Businessmen's Connection. So Matt, thank you for being here today. And let's start with your job, the CBMC. Tell people what they need to know about what your organization does.
Yeah, it's good to be with you, Liberty. At CBMC, we want to help men in all seasons of life learn to be able to reach, empower, and deploy other men for the gospel. We want men to be in community with other like-minded men, growing in their faith, and learning to be able to share their faith in the sphere of influence where they live. Essentially, that's what we do. And we want to be able to empower them with the tools and community to be able to do that and not be alone in walking out their faith.
That's so great. And something that I think is interesting is the history as well of CBMC. Mm-hmm. And so if I am correct, it was started or at least was ongoing during another time that was really hard for a lot of men, which was the Great Depression. So talk about that for a minute.
Yeah, CBMC began on the heels of the Great Depression, where you had men in the business community seeing their colleagues fall into deep sadness or despair because of the economy and what was going on, and many of them were killing themselves. They saw what was happening and said, "We've got to do something." And they, I would say, during the prompting of the Holy Spirit, they began doing prayer events and outreaches to help share the gospel and help men realize there's more to life than what was going on. There is a God that so loves them and cares about them and wants to have a relationship with them. And CBMC began in Chicago during the heels of the Great Depression and began to grow and now is an international movement almost 100 years later.
Wow, that's an amazing history. And so let's fast forward to today. Obviously, we're not in the Great Depression, but there are a lot of issues in the culture and economy that are impacting young men. As I mentioned, there's some reports of higher rates of loneliness among young men. Also, the economy is hard. I mean, young people in general are often having a hard time finding work. I've read reports with a lot of young men saying that they're not really sure what their purpose is or how to find meaning. People aren't getting married as young anymore. So there's a whole lot of factors, but just kind of tell me personally, what you're seeing on the front lines, as a ministry that reaches out to men.
Well, I think with culture, culture seems to say that what your vocation is your purpose. What you do, what job title you have, what level of education you have, what your paycheck stub says, that's your purpose. And that's a great lie, because men fall into the trap of thinking if I don't have a big enough paycheck, if I don't have the right job title, then I really don't have a purpose in my life, or mm-hmm. that's what they're chasing after as their mm-hmm. purpose. Which always, if we've seen anything just in our experience in dealing with men, that always lets people down. And so we want men to understand that they have a greater purpose than their job title or their paycheck. They have a duty to become godly leaders, not just at work, but in their homes, in their marriages. And not just leaders that impact at work and at home, but leaders who impact generationally, who have long-term impacts in the lives of other men. And there's this, we call it spiritual multiplication, where when one person's impacting the life of another, in turn that person grows and begins to impact the life. And there's this generational impact that happens. And so we want men to understand that they can do that. It's the Great Commission. Go and make disciples. And that's our purpose as believers.
Yeah, absolutely. Something that you said, was generational impact, your sphere of influence. multiplying, like making disciples, all of that involves other people, other human beings.
It does.
And then there's a lot of isolation now. And so we're seeing the rise of technology and these very personal seeming chatbots and AI. So what's the landscape like with that?
Well, you're right. With the rise of technology, AI in particular, where you can have seemingly this human companionship. I use AI. I'm able to, log into a platform and talk to it like another person. I use it to help get some of my work done. But when someone is in this, is experiencing isolation and loneliness, and you have this piece of technology that's responding to you, and you're treating it almost like a human by asking it questions and talking to it like a human, and it's responding to you, there's a temptation to think this is my new companion and it's going to tell me what I want to hear. It doesn't hold me accountable. Men need another brother in their life, another man in their life, that can be the person that holds them accountable, that speaks truth into their life, who is there in the ups and the downs, through those high points and low points of life, praying for you, encouraging you. You're not going to get that out of technology, because there's that lifeblood that comes from having someone else beside you who's been through the trials themselves. And so at CBMC, we encourage a life-on-life discipleship. We encourage men to get into a life-on-life relationship with another spiritually mature man who can walk with you through and model what it means to be a man of integrity, a man who has purpose. And a lot of times, spiritually mature people have been through the battles. They've been battle tested. They've had those failures, and being able to encourage someone who's experiencing those same battles, and being able to pray with them and share with that person what God has taught you through those times, there's power in that, and you can't get that again from an AI chatbot.
Do you think that there is maybe a little, I don't know, hesitation, as people get more accustomed to interacting through technology or just with technology, like with the chatbot, and we know that people aren't dating as much, people aren't getting married as young, the whole, what social norms of a few decades ago or the last generation are not really the social norms now. So is there kind of a barrier or a scariness of reaching out and trying to establish that kind of relationship or connection with somebody who maybe has felt emotionally isolated for a while? Yeah,
I think there's different barriers for people who may be struggling with, where do I start? How do I reach out to someone? I think the first step is being vulnerable, to say, hey, I really need a mentor, spiritual mentor in my life. Going to church and sitting through an hour sermon isn't enough. I need someone whom I can talk to, that can hold me accountable. And at CBMC, we want people to reach out. If you go to our website, cbmc.com, you can click our Get Started form. And if you're interested in discipleship or that life-on-life relationship, we want to help try to get you connected to someone that you can begin maybe that relationship with. But if you don't take that first step, or acknowledging, hey, I cannot keep doing everything alone. I can't keep these feelings bottled up. I have questions, and I want a human to talk to who's been through what I'm going through.
Yeah, that is so important, but it's so hard. I know I think it's hard for everybody. And again, I'm obviously not a man, but I think that sometimes it can be harder for men because maybe they've been told, well, I mean, let's just be honest, popular culture hasn't always been super kind to men, especially recently. And you also, maybe there's more of a stigma with being vulnerable.
Right.
So is that something that you see men struggling with, or kind of just already feeling bad, and then it's I'm struggling with work or loneliness, right, or not finding a job or whatever, and now I don't want to look emotional or vulnerable on top of that. Is there, are there stigmas that kind of stack up and prevent people from reaching out?
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's the great deception of the enemy, is to say, why would you even talk about that with someone else? No one else wants to hear about your problems. And the enemy is trying to make you feel like that you're the only idiot going through that. And so I think it's important for someone we want men to understand that you're not alone. You're not going through that problem for the first time. Other men have been there and walked in your shoes and want to be there to help you walk through it as well. There's another part of this is maybe there are listeners who have capacity, who want to mentor and disciple another person. That's something at CBMC. We want to equip men to do that. We want to empower them to do that. We provide tools and training so that men know how to invite other men into the conversation and say, hey, would you be interested in a life-on-life relationship? We provide the practical principles that they can use to help a man who may not feel vulnerable at that moment, but maybe it creates a place where they can feel vulnerable in that relationship and that build that trust. We want to empower them with those type tools to be able to do that.
That's so good. Get into, if you don't mind, like a little bit more of like a practical picture of what that looks like. And like if somebody does go and fill out that form, like what kind of things, does that take them through? Because somebody, if they haven't been in a mentorship type of relationship before, they may like still not be sure what that looks like.
Yeah. I'll share with you a recent story or testimony that we received from a wife, a lady who was sharing the impact on her marriage with her husband. Their marriage was on the brink of falling apart. She was vulnerable and said, "Hey, my husband, things aren't working out. we're probably gonna get a divorce." One of our CBMC guys reached out to her husband and just invited him into, hey, let's go have coffee. And they began talking and invited him into a life-on-life relationship, discipleship relationship, where they began going through one of our tools for discipleship called Operation Timothy. And the lady shared with us that as her husband began going through that over a period of time, she saw her husband change. He began to become very different, and their marriage took a 180 for the better. And there was restoration, and now she wanted to share that their marriage is stronger now than ever. Her husband is a different person, and those are the type of things we love, because it's another man reaching out to another man and saying, you can't do this alone. You can't be a good husband all by yourself. You need other men who've been through those difficult points or feeling the same way you're feeling, who's going to walk you through it and hold you accountable and speak into your life. We also, again, offer peer advisory groups. These are groups where men, particularly for business leaders, who it's not just to become a better business person or a better manager or president or whatever it is. It's how do I integrate my faith into what I do? And so we have peer advisory groups that business owners can connect into. And I visited one where a guy was his issue, and he was chosen to be the person for that month in the meeting. His issue was, I don't know how to balance all my companies and my family all at the same time. And he was able to get input and guidance, and they were able to ask him powerful questions so that he could put together a plan of how he can balance his time from a godly perspective of running his company well and being a godly husband and father. Having these guys speak in, and guys who probably had that same issue prior, being able to give guidance and encouragement, and again, the follow-up from those guys in the meetings following afterwards is powerful. Guys time and time again say to us, having my guys with me, my brothers, who are able to speak in, encourage, pray, walk alongside of me, there's nothing more powerful.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's not going to be found when you're just getting more and more comfortable having a chatbot be the person that you're talking to, or even if you do have friends, like sometimes it can be hard to break beyond that surface level of just kind of hanging out or not really talking about the real issues that matter in life. Right. And so I would love to hear more about like, what does Operation Timothy mean? And like, biblical mentorship specifically, because like having friends that you can hang out with is great, but
Right.
there is something unique about this mentorship relationship that we find a kind of blueprint for in the scriptures. Am I right?
Yeah. Yeah. So Operation Timothy is a tool. And what we would say is in a life on life relationship, CBMC, we call the person who is doing the discipling a Paul, and the person being discipled or mentored a Timothy. Operation Timothy is the content or track for the Paul to take the Timothy through, but the tool is just simply a jumping off point. It's the kind of the guide. The power is in the relationship, the godly relationship that forms between a Paul and a Timothy. So for me, when I was discipled through life on life discipleship, my Paul used the tool of Operation Timothy, but it was through our conversation and questions I could ask, and him sharing with me his experience, and him holding me accountable and through some of the principles that Operation Timothy lays out for a person. That was the most meaningful for me, because it first of all, it allowed me to see that I wasn't alone in some of the feelings I was experiencing. He experienced them as well, and he was able to point to Scripture and help me. We were able to dig into those places in Scripture to help me, that help me with some of the same issues that he dealt with as well. And again, he was praying for me. He was following up with me, because we met in a regular cadence. We met weekly, and at my Timothy now, I meet weekly with him, and it's passing on that unique biblical wisdom that comes along with life experience and the Scriptures to another man who doesn't have to feel like they're going through it alone. You can go and ask AI a question about Scripture, but having a person who's giving you feedback, and who is looking you in the eye, who is encouraging you with a pat on the shoulder, is much more powerful.
Yeah, it's so interesting because a recent interview I did was on just kind of chatbots more generally, and how to really know something like that happens in the context of relationship,
Right.
and getting that wisdom. And it's so neat to me to think about that, because that's really how we're made as human beings, is like we were meant to exist in relationship with God and with other people. And that's why, you kind of already talked about it, like you have that relational aspect, but I've seen arguments saying, well, I don't really need to go to church, or it doesn't really matter what kind of community I have. Like, I find a lot of community at my CrossFit gym, or, whatever. It's like, but there's something more specific about this kind of mentorship, because it's not just the relational aspect. It's also like this other big piece that we need.
Yeah. Well, another type of peer advisor group we offer is for young professional men. I visited one of the peer advisor groups, and we had young men who were just entering or in a few years into their profession. And again, their idea of success is, I've got to get the next promotion. I've got to have a certain amount of pay, and that's my purpose. That's what I'm working day in and day out for. But they forget a crucial part of that is, what does God say about how I work, and what does it look like? And again, having a facilitator who's or spiritually mature businessmen speaking into your life at that point is critical. Again, because they're not just talking to you about how to be more successful. They're talking to you about can you be more impactful in your life, and being able to grasp that as a young professional or as a young man, being able to learn how I can be successful in business or at work, and also be a loving, godly husband and father at a young age, again, creates a path for success. That again, you're not just impacting, getting a yourself getting a promotion, but you're impacting your children. You're learning to impact and influence people around you, not just to be a better leader, but for Christ.
Yeah, I would love to kind of circle back to something you said at the beginning, and that is, and you're touching on now too, is like it's easy to try to find identity in your title or what you do, but what happens when that's taken away, and maybe you get fired, maybe the economy crashes, maybe you're having a hard time finding a job.
Right.
And I would love for you to specifically speak to single men too, because that can be doubly hard, because you're like, well, I haven't started a family yet and I'm out of work. So like, where is my identity coming from? How can I still impact the community around me?
Well, that's a great question. And we do see men who are able to be more successful coming out of a crisis, job loss, even divorce, because they have a group of godly men around them who are helping them understand that your identity is not in your job, it's not in your paycheck, it's not in your marriage, it's in who you are as a child of Christ. And again, that identity, when someone is able to understand, okay, yeah, I may be going through a setback right now, but I'm still a child of God, and I have a purpose in that, living that out, living that faith out day to day. That's the testimony other guys see. And again, having someone encouraging us, someone who's probably been in our shoes, who've gone through some of those difficult times, encouraging us, letting them know, hey, you're not alone, and you will come through this. And you have a God who will see you through this, and you'll come out stronger on the other side, because then you'll be able to help other men as well when they go through those difficult times. But identity, we understanding and helping guys understand that their identity is not in their job title or their paycheck. Again, reminding them that's not where it's at. That's the false lie sold to us by culture. And so we want guys to understand there's a greater purpose that we live out while we're doing our vocation, while we're getting a paycheck, while we're growing a business, whatever it may be. There's a greater purpose for us.
Yeah, that's great. So in our last few minutes before we wrap up, I want to ask a few practical questions for the hypothetical listener right now. So, and I know that you've mentioned resources on CBMC's website, so feel free to mention those or give any other just practical tips. But for maybe the young person, the young man who maybe they know that they don't have a lot of like mentors or a strong in-person community, but they actually don't feel like lonely, like I'm good, I've got my thing, whatever. What would you say to them to encourage them to actually invest in a stronger in-person community?
Yeah, well, if there's a person out there, a young man who says, you know what, I don't know if I'm at a point where I'm in a crisis, or things are difficult. I feel like I'm on a good trajectory. I would encourage you then to look at how you can mentor someone else spiritually. Maybe you feel like you're spiritually mature. Don't just live out your faith on Sundays. What does it look like to live out your faith, Monday through Saturday? And so step into your calling of, okay, maybe I need to be mentoring or impacting the life of another man. I also want to just speak to the more mature man out there who maybe is in the fourth quarter of life, who's retiring, maybe getting ready to sell their company or step away. Want to encourage them to understand that we're not done. We're not done in retirement. There are young men out there who are craving a relationship, a connection with a more spiritually mature leader or man who can speak into their life. They're craving it. Barna research tells us that. They did a survey and a study, and one of the things that came from that is the millennials particularly are saying, I want a spiritually mature person speaking into my life. And when you have guys who are exiting the marketplace or workplace due to retirement, we don't want them sailing off and enjoying pina coladas on the beach and playing golf for the rest of retirement. There's a way for them to get connected and be able to take the wisdom that they've gained and be able to impart that to the next generation.
Yeah, that's beautiful. And I don't have the statistics at hand, but I know, I mean, there are so many studies that show like when you're investing in somebody else, like that actually is super fulfilling, and that keeps people young, so to speak, and sharp for a long time and fulfilled is, when you have that mutual relationship of being poured into, but also being able to pour into others.
Right.
Yeah. So so practically, whether you've got a young man looking for a mentor or you've got somebody who says, well, I want to help somebody else, I want to be a mentor. Tell us how they can get connected on your website, but maybe even just in general, like living a lifestyle where you are looking around with that lens on your eyes, like kind of just practical ways that you can be that person in your day-to-day life.
Well, if I would tell your listeners that the first thing that would be a great place to start would be our website, cbmc.com. Click on the Get Started button, and you just click the area where you're interested. You can also look at our programs and tools, getting connected, looking at our tools to see what maybe piques your interest or maybe the Lord's speaking to you about, and then fill out that Get Started form. But practically, I think the main thing is be open. Take a moment to stop and ask God, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to mentor? I would say yes, because that's part of the Great Commission. We are called to disciple. And what does that look like for me? And how do I get started? I would say to the person who's craving or wanting or realizes they need someone speaking to their life, be prepared to be vulnerable. Once you develop a relationship with someone or find that person who can be that discipler, that Paul, be prepared to be open and honest and vulnerable, because that's where the rubber meets the road. When you can be completely open about what's going on in your life, and that being able to trust what that person says as they speak into your life is important. But also pray. I think we got to pray about it. God, what is it you want me to do? What's the next step so that I am being obedient to impacting the person beside me?
Yeah, such great advice. So, Matt, any final thoughts or resources that you'd like to leave with us?
Yeah, we do have some other resources. Again, you can find out about them at cbmc.com. Our tools are free if you want them digitally. If you go to cbmc.com, you can we have a content platform called Advance. You can get access to Operation Timothy for free, along with other small group studies like Living Proof, which is a study on what does lifestyle evangelism look like? How do I share the gospel in a very relational way? Living Proof is a great small group study that you can do with your Sunday school class or your men's group or whatever it may be. It's not just for men. And then what does it mean to disciple? What does that look like? We have a study called Becoming a Spiritual Reproducer. That's all for free on our Advanced platform. You just and it's free. You just create a login and you have access to it all.
Okay. Wow. Great resources, great insight. Matt, thank you so much for being with us on the Know Why podcast today.
Liberty, thank you for having me. It's been a pleasure.